right, everyone, it's time to talk about Nintendo Switch 2 bestsellers. It's not something I usually like talking about, but when Nintendo comes out with a new console, and the initial cope right out of the gate is that only first-party games are going to sell, and that nobody cares about third-party games, that third-party games are failing beyond their lowest expectations, right? An actual quote from an actual article that was published. When we're being told stuff like that, this really needs to be addressed. This really needs to be called out because I was very quick to point out immediately that a lot of third-party games were doing extraordinarily well on Switch 2 at launch, right? Street Fighter 6 was consistently in the top 10. Fantasy Life did well. The cope basically amounted to the fact that the some of the games were older ports or even launched on other platforms. Like it was just a gigantic cope to downplay reality. So this week I thought it was time that we take a look and see at the bestsellers page because this is really interesting because the narrative has always been that third-party games never sell on Nintendo hardware. They can't sell on Nintendo hardware. I have better hardware for that. That was always like the overarching narrative when it comes to Nintendo consoles. I would argue the third-party game thing is the primary cope when it comes to Nintendo hate. So let's have a look and see at these bestseller pages and see what's on here. So, Silksong, bestseller, third-party game. Star Wars Outlaws, bestseller, third-party game. Bonanza, bestseller, first-party game. 2K, third-party game. Chronos, third-party game. No Man's Sky, third-party game. Story of Seasons, third-party game. Cyberpunk, third-party game. Madden, third-party game. Daemon X Machina, third-party game. Have you noticed anything about these bestsellers? Do you notice anything about these games? About how there's a pretty good solid mix between third-party and first-party releases? Like, it's not an insubstantial amount, It is not like a small, tiny, or like none at all. Like, the games that people actually want to buy are on the bestsellers page. And this is what I said immediately when the story that third-party games weren't selling came out was, who exactly is saying this? Like, do we have a studio name? Do we have a specific game? Because the reality is there are plenty of games on the platform that are doing well. And if there are games on the platform that are doing well, the entire supposition, the idea that third-party games don't perform well on the console, it completely falls apart. And that is my big takeaway from this. Week after week of studying these charts, seeing games jump wildly up and down, seeing new releases constantly come out, Silksong and Star Wars Outlaws came out this week, and Chronos. Seeing new games come out and do well fairly consistently, you start to see a pattern emerge. The entire argument that third-party games do not sell well on Switch 2 was entirely based on some random article from some nobody website from a source that we know is completely unreliable. You are delusional if you believe that game journals are getting top-secret information from developers regarding their concerns about Nintendo Switch 2, right? They're not going to go to like Kotaku or like Ars Technica or like IGN for that. Like what they're going to do is go on Twitter and complain. Oh, wait a minute. You have people going on Twitter and complaining about Silksong's price point right now because it's making the rest of us look bad. Isn't that like a more reasonable supposition for what's actually going on here? The people complaining about Switch 2 are people who genuinely want to see it fail and benefit from it doing poorly. That is what I've been seeing for the past 20 years.
Sure.
This is what anybody who's been remotely involved with the Nintendo coverage of gaming journalism will tell you, is that they are so completely delusional, so completely out of touch, that they really do have no idea what's going on at all. They will deliberately manufacture stories in order to downplay Nintendo. Just look at how the N64 is treated today, which is, the N64 was obviously this incredibly popular platform. It has several of the best games ever made. People look back on the console fondly. It has all this stuff, and yet the pervasive, overwhelming narrative is that it was a failure. Why? Because supposedly the PS1 did better. Never mind the fact that no IP on PS1 established itself as well as their N64 counterparts. Completely forget about the Game Boy. Completely forget about Pokemon being introduced that generation. Just ignore all of that. Like, Nintendo lost. Like, Nintendo could never compete with Sony. And now we're seeing like a similar kind of mindset. Only this time, the gaming media cannot stay ahead of the developing culture and fan response. Like, they cannot gaslight you into thinking third-party games are doing poorly when you can simply go to Target or GameStop or the eShop or whatever and see firsthand at what's doing well and what's failing. That is my big major takeaway here, is that because these games are doing well, because you can see them on the bestsellers page, because we have a little bit of insight into what's actually happening, nobody except the most delusional, out of touch bloggers believes that the Nintendo Switch 2 is failing or that third-party games don't sell well. That is the reality of the situation, is that Silksong by itself is probably a big enough release to carry the entire month. The entire narrative we've been told for the past 2 months that, like, Switch 2 didn't have enough major games coming out. With this one release, that narrative has completely collapsed. And I'm sure, like, the pervasive, overwhelming cope in regards to that is that Silksong is also available on other platforms, but that doesn't matter. You are legit arguing against third-party games on Nintendo consoles, no matter how well they do or how successful they are. It's always some giant cope in regards to their success and relevancy. And that's been a problem for a very, very, very long time.